Hey, what's up you guys, Paul here, and today we're comparing the Canon 50mm 1.8 STM to the Yongnuo 50mm 1.8, and we're starting right now. Both of these lenses are immensely popular and are both in the top 10 lenses sold on Amazon in various countries. Now, I had never used a Yongnuo lens, but since it had gotten 5-star reviews in many different countries, I decided to buy it and try it out. For this specific test, I decided to use a crop sensor camera, as I believe that most of you guys might use a crop sensor camera. I'm using a Canon T3i, also known in Europe as the 600D. After each category, I will show you a side-by-side comparison where you can vote on your favorite and decide which lens you prefer. Now let's see if this 50% cheaper Yongnuo lens can challenge the Canon. Without really going into details, when you look at the picture on the LCD screen behind your camera, the Yongnuo seems quite similar to the Canon, which surprised me. I was very happy when I was taking pictures with it. However, when you go into Lightroom and zoom in a little bit more on the picture, you can clearly see that the Canon is sharper. It has a sharper overall image. Shooting at 1.8, the Canon is way better than the Yongnuo, where the Yongnuo is really soft in the edges. If you push it up to f8, the difference between these two guys were a little bit less, but the Canon again had an overall sharper image, so Canon gets a point in this category. The Canon lens gave me focus in basically 90% of the shots, very reliable, very fast, while the poor Yongnuo struggled a lot. And even when you zoom into the pictures in Lightroom, you can see that it's not even in focus completely. On the back of the screen, it looks like it's in focus. But careful there, because the picture might not even be in focus, which is weird. Now, there are some lenses that you might have to go into the camera settings where you do a micro adjustment. It's not a fire. Canon, much better, much faster than the Yongnuo. When I had the live view mode on my T3i, the autofocus did not work in none of the lenses. However, when I put it on my 1DX Mark II, the live view autofocus worked in both lenses. So that's something to take into consideration. Now, another bonus thing here regarding the focus is that when you put the Canon lens on your camera body, the lens will retract itself, while the Yongnuo doesn't communicate with the camera that much, so it just stays out. But that's not a super important point. But again, in the autofocus category, another point to Canon. Now, for me, vignetting is not usually a big problem because it is very easy to adjust that in Lightroom. If you shoot at 1.8, the vignetting is very noticeable on the Yongnuo, while on Canon it's less noticeable. If you shoot at f8, you can't really see the difference between the Yongnuo and the Canon regarding vignetting. But again, you can fix the vignetting very easily in Lightroom and also in Premiere Pro, DaVinci and all those editing software if you shoot video. Another point, bong, Canon. When shooting the Yongnuo, I saw that my skin tone was a little bit red. You can also see that on this base, the stone base that I used, which is not desirable. The Canon is famous for having very good colors when it comes to skin, both from their camera bodies and lenses. Again, another point to Canon. Yongnuo lens reminds me a lot of the older 50mm from Canon, which was the Mark II version. Noise is similar, build quality the same, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The Yongnuo is a little bit noisier than the Canon. The Canon is not as noisy. It makes some noise, but not that much. Another point for Canon. Now, as I mentioned before, the Yongnuo lens reminds me a lot of the older Canon 50mm lens. Very plasticky, and that was why the old Canon lens was called the Plastic Fantastic. This is really back to that kind. Now, this is also plastic, but it is a bit harder. The Yongnuo lens Canon is sturdier built, and one drawback here is that the Yongnuo lens has only got like a plastic mount, where the STM from Canon has the metal mount, which does make a difference, makes it a bit more durable. And another thing here is that the focus ring is very, very close to the edge. It's a little bit loose, while on the Canon it's a wider focus ring, much smoother. Hands down, point awarded to Canon again. Sorry Yongnuo, you're struggling. If you compare the bokeh on these two lenses, they are very similar. Both produce a kind of football-shaped oval bokeh in the edges around the camera. Not a big drawback, but they do produce, both of them, very similar results. And if you want to get yourself a 1.8, you're going to see an immense difference between a 1.8 lens and your kit lens that might open up to 4.5 or something like that. So it's a draw. Point for both of them. Yongnuo's first point, I'm happy for that. Now I'm going to get a bonus point here to Yongnuo for the price. This one is about $59, where the Canon comes in at about 120, 125. Clearly the point is awarded here to Yongnuo, but I don't know what to say, man. It's half the price of this Canon lens, but you don't get the same results. I honestly hoped the Yongnuo would do a little bit better than it did, and I am a little bit disappointed. If money is your biggest obstacle and you really want to dive into the world of shallow depth of field, I guess you could get yourself the Yongnuo, now knowing its limitations. But I would be careful in using it for paid work, as the image is not really sharp enough, it's not very reliable. Now, if you already own this Yongnuo lens, I would definitely recommend you to upgrade to the Canon 1.8 50mm STM, because this is much more reliable, much faster. It's going to give you a better focus, sharper image, less vignetting. I mean, it's just a better lens overall. So get yourself the Canon. You agree? Leave a comment below. Ciao.